Hello, my name's Amanda Whewell. I'm a textile artist from New Mills, and today I'm going to show you how to take up a hem. Here's the demonstration. Okay, so first we're going to have a look at taking up a hem with a traditional hem stitch. I've got a pair of culottes here and the hem's coming down a little bit there. So we're going to repair that. The edge of this hem, like a lot of hems at the moment, are finished off with an overlocker. So we've got a folded piece of fabric and this overlock stitch, and we're going to stitch that up in a minute. I'll show you how to do that, but beforehand I'll show you the stitch on this yellow fabric where you'll be able to see more clearly. So if I was going to do an invisible hem on here, I would use a white thread or a yellow thread or cream, something very similar to the colour of the fabric, and then you wouldn't really notice the stitching. But so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to use this black thread so the stitch shows up and you can see how to do it. When you measure your thread, take it in your thumb and forefinger and measure it down to your elbow, and that's about as long as you need it. If you get a really long thread, it gets tangled and knotted and you'll get in a muddle with it. So you've got your thread, you can thread your needle just straight away like that through there, or quite an easy way of doing it, if you double the cotton over the needle like that and pull it off the sharp end of the needle, you've then got a little hoop which is much easier to get through the eye of the needle than the single thread. So your needle's threaded. You want one short end and one long end, and in the long end you're going to tie a little knot just to secure your thread when you start your stitching. So pop the end through there, I've got a little knot. And put the scissors out the way, and I'm going to secure the thread on the inside. So this is the equivalent of the hem on the culottes. This is more traditional, it's a fold and a double fold. Whereas on the culottes, you've got the overlocked edge. Here we've got this folded edge, but we treat them the same. So starting on the folded over bit, you can put your needle through, in and out like that. Pull it gently and the knot will just secure it there. Now to secure it properly, we're going to do two little stitches. So I've done one there, and I'm going backwards. I'm going back towards the right and coming up towards the left with these two little stitches, and that secures your thread. That's nice and tight now. So then to start the hem stitch, you take a tiny little stitch in the main part of the fabric. So this is going through to the front of the fabric, a tiny little stitch, not in the fold, in the actual main part of the fabric. And then from there, you're going to push your needle diagonally into the fold. I'm going to pull that through. Get it uncaught there. I'm going to do it again. You take a tiny little stitch, and that stitch is in the main part of the fabric there. Tiny little stitch in the main part of the fabric, and then put your needle through the folded bit or the overlocked edge. Whoops, my needle's come unthreaded. I just thread that back up again over the edge, push it through. Be more careful this time. So the tiny little stitch into the main bit of the fabric and then up through the fold. And again, tiny little stitch in the main bit of the fabric and up through the fold. You can always separate them if you want to. You can do the tiny little stitch and pull it through and then go through the fold. Each time I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 centimetre between the stitches. They don't have to be neat and even. Doesn't matter if they're bigger or shorter, but always just a tiny one in that main bit of the fabric and through the fold. Do one more, tiny one, and through the fold. Now if we look on the other side, you'll see these tiny little stitches. Now because we've used black thread, they're showing up a lot, but you imagine if that was in white or cream, you wouldn't really see that against this pale yellow fabric. So choose a colour that's similar to your fabric and it will be invisible. So back on this side, we finished the bit we need to do. Now to secure the thread, we're going to do those little stitches into this folded bit, because you won't see that. I've done 1, 2, 3 little stitches on top of each other. Remember, always go from the right to the left, pull. And that's secured your thread, it's not pulling your stitches anymore. So that's done. I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to tie another knot in the end here, because I'm just going to show you it actually on the culottes, on that bit that's come down. So I've tied my little knot, and move that over there. And here's the culottes. So it's just the same, except we've got this overlocked edge instead of the folded edge. I've turned it round like that. So I'm going to secure my thread in the folded up bit there, pull it through gently till the knot, 1, 2 little backward stitch. I'm doing exactly the same thing, it's just not so easy to see it because I'm now using a black thread which will disappear into the pattern on here. I'm going to collect a tiny little stitch on that front bit and through the overlocked edge. A tiny little stitch on there and through the overlocked edge. And you can see that this isn't all black where I'm doing my little stitches, it's green and blue and different colours, but it won't notice because we're doing such tiny stitches. Tiny little stitch there, through the overlocked edge, tiny little stitch, through the overlocked edge, tiny little stitch, through the overlocked edge. Whoops, I've pulled the thread out again. I'll just thread it again. If you do keep pulling your thread out, try and hold, when you do your stitches, try and hold your thread at the eye of the needle. I'll do one more little stitch there, through the overlocked edge. When you pull it through, hold the thread as well as the needle. If you pull it like that, it's all going to pucker up, so make sure you keep your tension right. If it gets puckered up, just flatten it out like that. If we've got it nice and flat, I'm going to finish off now with those 2 little backward stitches. 1, I'll do 3, 2, pulled it out of tension, and the last one. And that won't pull anymore, that won't pull out of tension, it's secured. So I can find my scissors, snip the end off because I've secured it, and if you look on there you can't really see where we've done that at all. Invisible hem. Okay, so we've just looked at a sort of traditional hem stitch, but a lot of clothes now have a machined hem like this. So here the hem is not as deep as it was on the culottes. It's folded over twice and it's machine stitched. Now, if a hem like this comes down, you can still fix it by hand by doing a back stitch. So I'm going to put that out of the way and back to the yellow fabric and the black thread so you can see what we're doing. Measure the thread from between your thumb and forefinger down to your elbow and then cut it off. It doesn't need to be very long. If it's really long, it will not untangle. The easiest way to thread your needle is to fold the cotton over your needle, pull it through the sharp side, and then that will slip easily through the eye of the needle like that. Again, 1 long and 1 short side. On the long side, tie a little knot to secure it. So on here I've got the hem doubled over, and I'm going to show you now how to repair a machined hem. So again, we can start and finish and do what we want to on this bit because this is inside, nobody's going to see it. So I'm going to pull it through gently to the knot and then do those 2 little stitches. 1, remember, go back, go in on the right, come towards the left, 2 little stitches, and that's secured your thread. Now we're going to do a back stitch. Now this time you really want to work on the other side of the fabric to get it neat. So I'm going to put the needle through onto the other side of the fabric. If your hem's come down a long way, you might want to press it to keep it in place or even pin it, but these are just short pieces. So you need to still make sure you're stitching through the folded bit on the back, but your stitches will be neater from the front. So I'm going to go in and out, so I'm doing a sort of double stitch there, and this time I'm working from the front. I've secured the thread at the back, but I'm working from the front. So I've now got one stitch and I've got this space here, and we're doing what's called a back stitch. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of that last stitch, and I'm going to come up on the other side of that thread. So I've done a big stitch through again. I'm going to pull that there. Now I'm going to go back again to the end of that stitch and come up on the other side of the thread. So your needle's gone in on one side and out on the other. Again, I'm working from right to left. So I'm going in there and out there. It's called a back stitch, and you just have to remember to keep going backwards and always come up ahead of where your thread is. And if you look on the other side, you've still got a line, but your stitches are doubling over a bit. So that's why you want to work on the front, because that's not as neat. But that stitch there would fix a hem like that. Obviously that's black and this is a pale colour, but you can see how you could fix a hem like that. So when you get to the end, I'm going to do one more stitch. Go in there and out there. You can feel or see through the fabric to make sure you're going through the hem still. And when you get to the end, take your needle back to the other side again. So we're now on the reverse, on the bit where we've got the folded edge. And finish off your thread by doing 2 more or 3 maybe little back stitches. 1, 2, 3. And that's nice and secure. Once it's secure, you can cut your thread. So you've now got your invisible hem stitch, which looks like little diagonal slanted stitches on that side, tiny little stitches on the front, which done in a same colour wouldn't show up. And on this one, you've got all your messy bit on the back. On the front, you've got a nice straight line of back stitch. So now you know how to take up the hem. Thank you for listening.